Morning. Welcome and thank you for joining us tonight. Our purpose in coming together is to talk about the hybrid model that we have outlined for our return to school in August 31st for our students, and to give you an opportunity to hear a little more about that as it pertains just to the middle school level, and a chance to ask some of the questions. The folks who are here, and Mr. Haran will introduce them in a minute, are also parents. So, you know, we don't just look at this as educators, but also understand that this is not an easy decision for parents to make. But we want you to know whatever decision you choose, whether it is Haverford Online or to have your child participate in the hybrid model that will be described for you tonight, your child is going to experience the same nurturing, caring environment with respectful adults who care deeply about your children. They're our teachers, and they're going to, we know, give it their all, regardless of what environment they are working in. We will answer whatever questions we can answer tonight, and sometimes if we can't answer it, it's that we don't know yet. You know, the fluidity of the virus itself, the ever-changing guidelines that we get. Sometimes we just don't know the answer to a question at the time that it is asked. So it's not that we're not willing to share information, but we want to make sure that when we share information with you that it's accurate and it doesn't have to continue to keep changing over and over again. So thank you for joining us. You can post questions in the chat. And Mr. Haran will get us started now and introduce his team. Jen Saxa from the curriculum office is with us as well, and she's going to help facilitate the questions as they're coming through in the chat. Mr. Haran.
Thank you, Dr. Rushi. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. We have a short agenda that I will share with you in a moment, but before we get started, I wanted to just recognize our administrative team. Erica Harvey is our 8th grade administrator. She's new to our building this year, but she was at Manoa Elementary School last year, so we're excited to have her working with us. Randy Taylor is our 7th grade administrator, and he'll be joining us in a minute. He was just texting. There's some technical issues that he's having getting in, but he'll be with us. Matt Crater, who's our 6th grade administrator, is with us as well, and also Jessica Gondak, who's our secondary coordinator of pupil services. Our team at the middle school, I'm just going to echo what Dr. Rushi said, caring, committed professionals. We've been working tirelessly to develop a plan that will support our students, our families, and our staff, as well as our community. And we're reacting to all of the information that's coming in, and that's, as you know, ever changing. So we're really doing our best to make sure that we provide a plan that will work for all of us. I also wanted to give some props to our staff. That's our teachers, our instructional aides, our secretaries, our bus drivers, our maintenance workers, anybody that's connected to our school. This has been a unique, I don't even want to say summer, because this has been going on before summer hit even. People have been going above and beyond and working outside the normal scope of their duties to ensure that we're prepared for when school reopens to offer the best opportunities for our kids. And it's a real focused team effort. I think the challenges that are in front of us are that constantly changing environment, and we're really asking our professional staff to pull everything out of their bag of tricks to help us make sure that we've covered every question and angle to ensure that we're going to provide a great experience for our kids and families. So I am going to share my screen with you so you can see.
While you're doing that, Mr. Haran, I just want to mention that Mr. Parker is here with us as well.
Great. So hopefully you all can see that. This brief agenda I'll go through this evening, and we'll take periodic breaks in the agenda to answer questions that are pertinent to what we've just covered. And then at the end of the agenda, there's going to be plenty of time to just ask questions that you have that may not be on this particular agenda. The first item of this health and safety plan, if you're familiar with the district webpage and that first huge picture on the webpage, you can access all of the ongoing information that is being communicated and shared over the last few months with everybody in the community. One item that you want to pay particular attention to is that health and safety plan, which will be discussed and approved at this Thursday's board meeting. It's important to like familiarize yourself with that because it'll guide a lot of, you know, the things that we do once we get back into the building. So that's an important element that you might want to make yourself familiar with. The hybrid models that we're going to share with you this evening are based on first cohorting our students, and I'll explain a little bit about how we will be cohorting students at the middle school, and then we'll move on to 2 cohort models that we'll discuss. We are cohorting students very similarly to how they're cohorting students throughout the district in elementary and at the high school level, where we will divide a grade level group of students into an A group or a B group alphabetically by their last name. We are going to do our best to coordinate with the high school to keep that letter split relatively close. We're in constant communication with the high school about how to make that happen. Our A group will attend full days of in-person school on Mondays and Wednesdays. It's twice a week, and full days of at-home school on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. The other group, the B group, will attend full days of in-person school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and full days of at-home school on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We will further group our kids according to their math class. So when students get a schedule from us, that schedule will be based on their math class, and that math class will be their homeroom as well. And that will be a cohort of students that stay together when they're in school. So we're not only dividing kids into smaller groups, that A and B group, where we're going to cut our total number of students in half. Half will be at school, half will be at home learning. But we are also going to group by math class. That math class will be their homeroom, and that will be the cohort of students that stay together. That math class is the math class that we have kids scheduled in Power School for. So we have a very complex scheduling process at the middle school, a lot of kids, a lot of classes, a lot of different levels. And that Power School scheduling is very important to us when we move away from this cohorting model, when we get back to what we normally do. It's important that our kids are in a place where there will not be dramatic changes to their schedule. So that's really important to us at this point. I'm going to click on the chat section to see what kind of questions we have here, if any. Jen, do you see any? I'm like struggling to see.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to go through. And, you know, we recognize that while we're pausing for each section, that there might be questions that are getting posed now that are on the agenda to be discussed later. So we may hold off on responding to those questions just yet until after we've covered that section and see if they still remain questions. I also just wanted to mention that this is being recorded, and therefore you can go back and rewatch it if you so desire, or if you have to leave early or you know someone who had to miss it, we will have it posted for you on the website. So we did have just a question about if they're grouped by math, how are we meeting their needs for English language arts?
So if they're grouped by math, how are we meeting their needs for the other core content areas? So if you're familiar with and I know our 7th and 8th grade families are probably more familiar with this than our 6th grade families. We've traditionally leveled students by their math and language arts class in 6th and 7th grade, and in 8th grade, all of their classes are leveled. So we already have like experience in our school as part of our, way to schedule students and culture, that there's a lot of leveling that takes place within our school. I hope that answered. I think when I look at my chat section, everybody's going to be able to see that if I share my screen. So I'm going to defer to you to do the questions, Jen.
Yep. That's what I'm here for. Great. I think we are continuing to get questions, but I believe that some of them will be answered in your next section.
Okay.
If you want to move to the next one.
Sure. So I'm going to get both of our.
And Mr. Rand, as you're moving on, if I could just ask you to stress for folks, when we talked as recent as last week at the board meeting, we were still looking at an early dismissal for in-person learning and then going home and continuing that. So there's some questions when you mentioned full day earlier. Is it a full day 12:30? Is it a full day 2:30? So I know that's the next piece that you're going in, to talk about what those differences may be.
Great. Yeah, and we, as the information has continually changed, and also the requests from staff and families and our school board and our central administrative staff, we initially were doing a lot of our planning on that cohort model with no lunch. And that was what, if you watched the school board meeting last week, you saw that we did a presentation on that model. After that particular meeting, we were asked to explore what that model would look like if we had lunch at the middle school. So I'll briefly review the cohort model with no lunch, see what kind of questions pop up, and then we'll do the model with lunch and see if, what questions pop up for that kind of a model. And if you're looking at the screen, you'll see that there's a lot of items that are almost identical in both models, and then you'll see the change when lunch kind of comes into play. So students will arrive at school between 7:30 and 8 o'clock, and they'll be arriving by bus as early as 7:30. And we have kids that, walk or get driven to school that come a little bit later. But there's that gap of time because we want kids to funnel into the school, slowly. We're not going to have kids congregate outside in their grade level meeting groups. As soon as they step onto campus, they're going to walk into the building, and we need everybody to be into the building before 8 o'clock. So we'll send you a more detailed schedule, but between 7:30 and 7:50, people will be transitioning into the building. 7:50, we're going to start our morning routine, and classes will start at 8 o'clock. We will have 47-minute classes for every one of the classes during our cohort model here. Staff will transition from class to class. Students will not. So students are going to be in that particular classroom. Their math teacher will come in, teach them their math class. The math teacher will leave. The language arts teacher will come in and teach them their language arts class. That teacher will leave. We're planning on 5 core classes per day: math, science, language arts, social studies, and then world language for 8th grade. The reason there's a little bit of a difference in who gets what: in 6th and 7th grade, there are 2 periods of language arts during the course of the day. So that's where the little difference is between 6th and 7th and 8th grade. For the no lunch model, our unified arts staff will be providing interdisciplinary support. And what that is unified arts teachers will be working closely with core teachers. So I'll give you an example. Our art teacher might be working directly with the math teacher. They'll be in class together, and they'll be supporting each other with the instruction for the day. There will also be mini lessons provided by our unified arts staff. So they will do brief 26-minute lessons based on their content. So that's how we can get our regular unified arts in. No lunch for students in this model. Students would be dismissed at 12:30. Our bussers will leave the building first. We'll get them on the buses, and then we'll have our walkers dismiss at 12:35. Our plan for this model is to have our specialized music classes like band, chorus, and orchestra remain at school if they like, and there'll be an hour of instruction for them at that, at that time. Our unified arts, and that the day's not over for our kids, even though they're dismissed from the building. Kids will go home, and our unified arts staff would provide synchronous, live on the computer, face-to-face teaching on the computer, and asynchronous, which would be a taped lesson of instruction, and that'll take place from 1:10 until 2:45. So it's a full day of teaching and learning. Some of it's in person, and some of it is at home using their device to experience and participate in synchronous and asynchronous instruction. Questions about the cohort no lunch model?
And there are a couple of questions that just have to do with the amount of time that it will take kids to transition from being in school and then either getting home because they have a longer walk or a longer bus ride, and then the time that the next sessions would begin at home.
Good question. So if you look at the dismissal time and then the start of the unified arts synchronous or asynchronous instruction when they're at home, we kind of like gauged our walkers. We know we actually talked to our walkers before this. So we have a general idea how long it takes our kids to walk home. And we also know how long it takes our bussers to drop most of our kids off. We were planning on doing the asynchronous teaching and learning as that first piece at 1:10. So there's some flexibility. If a student got home a couple minutes after 1:10, they could actually participate in that asynchronous learning after 2:45. And we're going to build our, synchronous live when the teacher's on the computer live later in that time frame.
Great. And a couple of questions just coming in, and I'm not sure if this is maybe later in the presentation, just about what could chorus and band look like, particularly chorus because of, everybody singing in a room, and has there been discussion about that?
Absolutely. So we've planned for our band, chorus, and orchestra and to be held in the large group areas of our building. So band would take place in the cafeteria, so there'd be no furniture down there. That cafeteria typically seats 500 students, so there's plenty of room for our band down there. Our orchestra would take place in most likely Gym D, which is another one of our gyms. We plan on having chorus take place in the auditorium. Our auditorium seats over 500 people. And remember, we'd have half of our students at school. So our typical chorus class, 90 maybe, would be at 45. So we'd have 45 students in the auditorium that seats 500 students. And we would space them out more than 6 feet. And the teacher would be up on the stage. So we have some plans for like these large group areas where we're definitely going to put those kinds of classes in, because we're well aware of, that concern.
Great. And just if you could define unified arts for folks who are not familiar with that term.
Sure. Sorry about that. I probably should have
added
that to the document. Unified arts, non-core classes. So in that document, it details what a core class is, which I highlighted right there real quickly. A unified arts class is a music class, whether it's specialized music or general music, phys ed class, and then you also had your quarter classes. So typically every grade, you have a health, a technology, a world language in 6th and 7th grade, and the only difference is you have in 8th grade, you have family consumer science. But those quarter classes that kids, if you're an elementary student coming into 6th grade, they're currently referred to as specials. We call them unified arts at the middle school. And our 7th and 8th grade students, the ones that are rising 7th and rising 8th grade students, are very familiar with what our unified arts classes are, and they can clue their family in on all the details for how that works.
Great. And Dan, I don't believe that you've mentioned it, but there are several questions about would chorus occur outside on any occasion? And I'm sure that's something that you have discussed. I know I've heard the teachers talk about that themselves.
Yeah. And if there's families here that were also in the earlier session with the elementary schools, they mentioned having class, whatever that class is, outside is as much as possible. We have that same philosophy, and we have a nice, we have tons of outside space that we're, able to use. We'll develop a schedule. We'll develop a space for each group. And we've been talking about that with our staff for the last few months about, like, let's take advantage of the weather, and when we can be outside, let's be outside.
Great.
So I'll focus now on the cohort model with lunch. Same routine in the morning. The difference will be from 8 o'clock until 2:30. The kids will be at school for instruction and lunch. We'll eat lunch at school. They will, same protocols for transitioning. There will be, kids will be in class and not transition. Same amount of time per class. One of the major differences is that students will have their unified arts classes in school as opposed to some in school and some at home. And same dismissal time for bussers and walkers. The challenge for us is developing a unified arts schedule. We have a couple proposals that if we did use this model, we would be talking to our unified arts teachers to see, what they felt would be most beneficial for our kids, and definitely include them in on the process of selecting which schedule to use for kids. The challenge is that, like, typically when we're in school, we have, depending on the grade, there's one period where there's a couple days of gym and a couple days of music, depending on, whether you're a specialized music student, which is the band, chorus, and orchestra. And there's variations of how that looks. That's one period of unified arts. The other period of unified arts is your quarter class, and the art, the technology, the world language, where a student would typically attend art for a quarter of the school year. That poses a real challenge for us, and we're going to have to be flexible in what that looks like for kids. They will get their unified arts classes. It's just going to look a little different. Just like everything's going to look a little different.
Dan, can I jump in there? There are
Sure.
still some lingering questions from if there were the no lunch model. Could students participate in the specialized music, or does that mean that they won't get their unified arts classes?
So I'll kind of jump right back to that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to highlight that for everybody.
Okay.
So in the no lunch model, we'll be dismissing students at 12:30 and 12:35. Students, we're going to plan for students after 12:30, from 12:30 to 1:30, to take advantage of those specialized music classes like band, chorus, and orchestra. And that would be at school. So, I don't know if the question is, if what I just said answered the question, or I don't know if the question is, suppose my child doesn't want to remain at school at that time, how will my child experience band, chorus, and orchestra?
Well, it wasn't phrased like that, but I'm sure people are interested in the answer to that question.
And if you're a parent who was at the earlier elementary session, Jen, you were mentioning the programming that we have for our specialized music classes. So we'll have the ability to provide synchronous and asynchronous teaching and learning while students are in the home. So we'll be able to provide band, chorus, and orchestra at home. But we're also making this, opportunity where they can experience what it's typically like after school is dismissed.
And do you have any transportation arrangements for students who are participating in that?
We've had preliminary discussions with the transportation department, and when we had that discussion, the transportation department felt strongly that they could accommodate transportation for students after 1:30. So our kids that stay for specialized music would be able to be bused home, the bussers.
Great. I just want to register that we are still hearing some concerns from families or just questions. If my child doesn't get home until 1:45, will they be missing Unified Arts? So I think it's just important to acknowledge that that is a reality for some folks, and that's something that we need to look at with our scheduling.
I'm going to write that down as a note. I'll make sure I address it.
Saxon, you mean 1:45 because they're participating in the specialized music, not students who are dismissed at 12:30 that to get home at 1:45. Because remember, we have less than half of the population already indicating their interest in transportation services, a significantly lower number.
Any other quick questions about the cohort model with lunch?
Would there be a snack if there's no lunch? Is a snack allowed? And where, just if you could reiterate where they'll eat lunch.
Great. So I'll address the snack. So this AB cohort model with no lunch, we do have a 26-minute break built into the day where the kids can have a snack. We know that that's going to be a challenge for kids to be in five classes without some kind of a break. So we're going to build in that break where they'll have an opportunity to have a snack. So we did think about that. And what was the second question, Jen?
In the lunch model where we are having lunch in school, where in the school are they having the lunch? If you could just reiterate that.
Good question. A lot of our plan is focused on cohorting students and keeping students together. We would plan for students to have lunch in their classroom. So their classrooms will be set up so they're at least 6 feet apart, which is what we need to have happen to ensure that everybody's safe. Traveling down to the cafeteria, presents challenges with just kids moving in the building. If they were in the cafeteria, they would still be grouped with the kids from their classroom. They would not be doing what they typically do, which is sit with friends from across the grade. So essentially you'd be taking that classroom of 14 kids and picking them up and just putting them in one section of the cafeteria. They'd still all have to face forward. They'd all be sitting at single desks or tables. We need, and I think I mentioned a second ago that we're going to have our band down in the cafeteria. We need that large space for a classroom. So there's a couple elements that impact that decision, and we feel that it's best for kids to eat lunch in their classroom. This last item here, AB cohorts with lunch schedule when at home. So kids, if we were going to use this AB cohort model with lunch, what would they be doing when they're at home on Monday to Thursday? Those students will sign in to each class by a specific time, like essentially taking attendance. They'll continue with their learning process. They will begin with some supportive videos, resources, and some guided learning. And the activities that they're doing when they're at home will include working in small groups, using digital and non-digital tools, interacting with videos, and a series of other activities that they will be participating in. I'll see if there's any questions. I'll kind of scroll up, and you can let me know, Jen, if there's any questions about that.
Sure. We are continuing to get questions in, not yet about that. A couple of questions. How does seminar look? For those who attend a seminar class, is that in person? Is that online? Will they be still attending that?
Yeah. So whether we're eating lunch at school or not eating lunch at school, seminar will have some face-to-face contact, and they'll also have some synchronous, asynchronous teaching and learning as well. So just like all of our kids, they're going to have face-to-face teaching and learning, synchronous and asynchronous teaching and learning. Our schedule, like when the kids are actually in school, whether it's the the lunch or the no lunch schedule, our day is going to look relatively the same as when we weren't dealing with this huge issue. We have to make some adjustments just because the number of days that we're in school or the amount of time that we're in school. But everything that kids have had, they will get, but there's going to be some adjustments to time and frequency.
Great. A couple of questions about grades. Are students going to get grades, and how will that look for the work that they do in the days that they're not learning in school, but they are learning at home?
Good question. Again, the expectation is that things are going to look relatively the same. Students will absolutely get feedback on their performance, and that feedback, sometimes will come in the form of a grade. That feedback sometimes will come in the form of some written feedback. That feedback sometimes will come as verbal feedback. So all the traditional modes that we've communicated to kids to give them feedback on how they're performing, we will continue to do.
Great. And on a related note, will we still be using PowerSchool? And also, are we using, and I can say this, we are using Canvas as our K-12 learning management system, but there's going to be a learning curve with that. Can you just speak about how we're using PowerSchool and how we're helping get kids acclimated and families acclimated to Canvas?
Sure. So we're absolutely going to use PowerSchool as the tool to communicate feedback on performance. We'll continue to use that. So things that people get feedback, well, families and students get feedback. There's grades that are put in there. There's letter grades, there's percentage grades, there's written feedback, and then we have our, quarterly reporting for grades, like report cards, and our, final report card as well. So that'll all remain the same. Using Canvas, I'll jump down to this bottom item since that came up now, and then I can pop back up here in a second. The district has a new One to World initiative where every middle school student will receive a Chromebook. We'll put a brand new Chromebook into every single student's hands. That's going to be a very important tool for us because when our students go home, they're going to be working with us synchronously and asynchronously with that Chromebook. When they're in school, they're going to use that tool often to organize and utilize materials. So we're going to have less like paper and less sharing of items in school, and we can deliver a lot of those items through the Chromebook. And our learning management system, Canvas, it's a delivery system where it'll house all of our lessons for students. It will be much easier for our students to navigate than what they were doing when we were out of school from March, April until the end of the year. It's kind of like a one-stop shopping situation where everything the students need will be on that platform, much easier for them to access, much easier for them to navigate. We absolutely will need to get students and families up to speed. If you've seen the weekly newsletter, it's really bi-weekly now in the summer, that I put out, I've embedded a few videos in there for families and students to start looking at to see how that learning management system works. But when we return to school, one of the things that we're, after we take care of really honestly the essential things like building that community and building relationships with kids, because that's really what we're going to be focused on when we return to school. We know very well the middle school student, and the kids that come to our school, absolutely want to connect with us, and we want to connect with them. And the people that work in our building, like our administrative staff and our teachers and our aides, the people that work in our building, love the kids that come into the school, and we are committed, to building those relationships. That's going to be the first, order of business for honestly, like, quite a period of time. Typically when kids start school in the middle school, we spend a couple days, 7th and 8th grade. Those kids are like, they know who we are, we know who they are, and we can get to work pretty quickly. We haven't had the opportunity with our rising 6th graders to do a couple things that we've done in the past. And we're going to do those things when the kids come to school. So getting oriented to the building, getting to know all the people that work in the building, getting comfortable with some new friends that they meet in class. We're going to have to spend a lot of time, building that foundation for our kids. Once we do that, we're going to move on to, like, how do you use your Chromebook? How do you use Canvas? And we'll ensure that they're well skilled at using that management system. We will also have to, work with our families to make sure that they're pretty familiar with it as well. Most likely, I have a feeling that, like, our kids are pretty technology savvy, and a lot of what that management system will be pretty intuitive for them to learn. And honestly, it's probably a good idea if you have the kids kind of teach you at home, like how to make things work. I think your biggest challenge is going to be, families, your biggest challenge is going to be, like, picking the right time and the right moment to ask that question, like, hey, can you show me what's going on there? We all know with middle schoolers, sometimes you have to pick the right moment to ask that question.
And we also, in addition to that, and they will be the experts, in addition to that, we will have tutorials available on Canvas for families, a little orientation to what it is and sort of how you can help your kids navigate through it. And we've actually had a suggestion if there's a way to offer sort of a training session for families at the start of the year. So we'll work with our technology department and see what the possibilities are for something like that. Just wanted to say that. And we have a few families who say, what if I don't need a device? Do I still have to take one? So we'll work with our technology department on that as well. I know sometimes we equip our equipment with certain abilities that we can't necessarily monitor or maintain with at-home computers, but certainly it's something that occurs at the high school. So we'll look into that as a possibility. We have a couple of questions coming back. Just when will we make the decision about lunch or no lunch? And I believe that will happen this week. Is that correct, Mr. Haran?
I see Dr. Rushi leading in.
Yes, just a few more, final details and some input to get, as I can't see all of the questions, but the questions that are coming through, yes, supervision is the piece that we are taking a look at, how that will occur. This is one of those examples where, we don't have everything completely mapped out, but we wanted parents to know now that Mr. Haran and the team at the school are looking at ways to try to provide 2 full days in person, in the building. The risk in sharing it is that we can't answer all of the specifics yet, but that is the one piece that's looming out there for us. And if we can get that tied up, then we will be able to communicate, but our goal is this week.
Back to Canvas, just a question, will kids retain their Gmail? Yes, they will. It integrates with all of the Google Suite services, so they will still use Google Docs and create slides presentations. Canvas will really serve like their notebook or their backpack where everything lives, and they'll go to that one place to get those things, but there are still lots of different tools that they'll use as they engage with their curriculum. So that's a quick one. And then Dan, I think that you still have some general protocols that may get us into some of the other topics that we're having people post questions about.
Okay, and this is not, all of the protocols that will be put into place in the middle school. When the health and safety plan is approved, that's a really detailed document that will go through a a lot of protocols that will occur in our school, but I listed a few that people have been constantly asking me about. So I'll kind of cover these brief ones, and then expect when that health and safety plan is approved, there'll be much more to peruse over. So when students enter our school, they're going to be wearing a mask and report directly to homeroom. And I mentioned that earlier about reporting directly to homeroom. When they enter the school, there's one-way directional hallways, so all the students will be walking in one direction. And I don't know if you've been out and about and you've gone into any large structure, a store, you'll see on the floor there's like little dots or X's and things like that to kind of keep people socially distant. We just are super fortunate. The floors in our school are white and red tiles, and our red tiles are 8 feet apart. So it's those markers are already on the floor. We just have to communicate that expectation to students about the distance and using those red tiles to kind of help them, stay at least 6 feet apart from each other. So our school's already laid out, and that little job is taken care of for us already. Wherever they are in our school at any time, the expectation is 6 feet of space between others and any person that's in the building. Students, when they're in classrooms, they're facing in one direction. These are all recommendations that have been, approved by lots of organizations. Frequent hand sanitizing. So every classroom will have a hand sanitizer in it. And there's also some portable ones throughout the school. And we'll be educating students, throughout the day, the week, the year, that they should be doing that. And we'll build that in. We'll build that in as part of the scheduled day. And part of the scheduled day will be brain breaks, movement breaks, mass breaks. There's some times where, the students the teachers are going to use their own judgment when those things need to occur. And there'll be some built-in times into the schedule where those things can occur as well. We're very sensitive and aware of what our kids need. And every kid's different. We have over 1,500 kids in our school, and, we love the diversity that we have. We really appreciate it, especially our leadership team. We frequently talk about the kids in our school, and we love the fact that we have kids that fall all along the spectrum. So when we do discuss planning for these things, we're thinking of specific students and making sure that all the students feel comfortable and welcome. Our teachers have brought the issue of brain movement and mass breaks up to us as well. They're, very seasoned professionals in our building, and they want to make sure that the kids are comfortable. If we have great relationships with those kids and they're comfortable, they're going to be open to learning, and we're going to have, be able to get the best out of them. So we're really striving to make sure that those things are in place for our kids.
Great. So a couple of questions. What about bathroom breaks? Will they be able to use the bathroom?
Absolutely. So we're going to, handle bathroom breaks like we typically handle bathroom breaks in our school. Every classroom has 2 hall passes. Students will go out on the hall pass, and we're going to, do a little bit more educating than we typically do about how many people are in the bathroom. We have staff that will be monitoring the halls that we typically haven't had in the past. And it's really just to ensure movement in the hallways. Middle schoolers are, they like to hang out with each other. I mean, that's that's the big thing about middle school is your friends are really important to you. And we're well aware of that. Typically when kids would go out on the hall pass, the expectation is it takes a couple minutes, but typically it would take more than a couple minutes because, they have some kind of coordinated hall pass meeting up time with their friends. And we're just going to have to explain to them that, we won't be able to do that at this point. And we'll have monitors in the hallway to ensure that kids kind of use the bathroom if they need to use the bathroom, and then get right back to class. But we have to also, like, there's a little bit of responsibility that we're going to, place in their hands, and they're capable of being responsible. It's just really communicating the expectation. I think that we're going to have to do a really good job of.
Great. A couple of mask related questions. One is, how might a mask break work? Another is, how are we monitoring to ensure that students are and teachers are wearing their masks, as well as will we have any clear masks for students to be able to see people speaking, particularly if they have a hearing issue or a need in that area?
Great. So our pupil services department has ordered clear masks for some of our professional staff who are working with students that need to have that ability to see their teacher's face, or the related therapist, their face or their lips. So that's something that we're well aware of, and that's already been planned for. How are mask breaks going to work? Individual teachers, so we'll have a plan for our outside spaces. Individual teachers know that they have access to certain space outside. An individual teacher can take their class outside for a mask break, and we're going to do those outside of the building, not in the building. An actual break. It's a little different when you're eating lunch, right? Yeah, that's not necessarily a break. That's a necessity. You got to take your mask off to eat your lunch. So we'll plan those out of the building mask breaks. Teachers have control over when they want to have those. We are going to build into the schedule a time where teachers should be thinking about a movement break or a mask break or a brain break. So again, teachers will have the autonomy to say, how am I going to use that 16 or 17 minutes? And those 17 minutes, for some teachers, they're going to take them out of the building for a mask break. What was the third part of that question, Jen? I answered two of it.
How are you going to ensure that kids are wearing masks and are wearing them properly?
Yeah. I think, our staff, part of it's going to be training, right? Communicating, education, and training. So that's a big piece of what we're going to have to do with our kids. Our staff is very sensitive to the fact that our plan is going to include staff and students wearing masks. We will collectively hold ourselves accountable, staff and students. Administration will be part of that collective community that's kind of like circulating constantly to ensure that like the protocols in our school are followed. And that's normally what we do at the middle school anyway. Like our administrative team, many of the parents who are familiar with us, we're not sitting in our offices during the day. We are out circulating all day long. And we will be, circulating our grade level groups. So we'll be, not only holding ourselves accountable, but, the people we work with, as well as the students. But I think a big piece of it's going to be education and understanding.
Sure. Will they use their lockers? They all want to know.
No, I kind of like didn't mention this one little piece right here. So
There we go.
Sorry about that. I kind of just skipped over. The expectation is that the kids will carry their book bag into their homeroom when they enter school, and that book bag will stay in their homeroom, which is their math cohort as well, group. So they will not be using lockers until we can kind of like loosen up on that with that social distancing expectation. Our lockers are literally right next to each other, and typically kids are making contact with each other. I mean, they're literally shoulder to shoulder to get into their lockers. So that's not something that we could do and honor the expectations of social distancing. So they'll literally carry their bags right into class. They'll have everything with them.
Great. We have a couple of questions that are sort of related. What happens if the numbers look good? Can we go back to considering a 5-day in-person? And then what happens if some authority tells us we have to close our school buildings? And I see Dr. Rushi moving, and I'm not sure if that. Yeah, okay.
So the first question about the numbers look good, can we go back to a 5-day? The numbers would have to change to the point where the social distancing would become less important as one of the mitigating factors for, to slow the spread. So that's, if it was indicated to us that 6 feet of social distancing was no longer one of the critical pieces, then we would explore that. I don't know what other directive would be put in place with that. The second question, if there was something about if we were going 100% online.
Yeah, right. If we had to go, if we were closed down by, whatever authority told us we couldn't have school in our school buildings, what would happen then?
And that would be, students would be engaging with their teachers, following their regular schedule of their day. So for example, if math is supposed to start at 9 o'clock in the morning, that teacher is on either with the entire class or with a small group, getting them set off, then with another small group. It's not the teacher, for the entire math period, just talking at the children, but structuring it that way. But they're following their schedule, and it's a combination of interaction with the teachers, independent work that they would be doing, and then also some small group work that students would be doing.
Great, thank you. A couple of questions coming in about, and we should probably define leveling, just about, so if my child were at in a certain level math class, but that's not the same level class they would have been in for English language arts, what's going to happen? Does that, so it's the same group of kids, what does that mean for my child?
It's a good question. That's honestly like a pretty rare occurrence in our building. So that's not typically, we don't have a lot of students in those situations. We will reach out to those families and come up with a plan and decide on, where's the best cohort to place that student.
Great.
We'll work together and figure it out. And we're, our teachers, just like the teachers in the elementary school and the high school, differentiate instruction as well. So we have the ability to meet the students' needs. It's really just figuring out where's the best place to put that student.
Great. A couple of questions about supplies. Number one, if we're giving out devices, will students still get physical paper things, workbooks, textbooks, etc.? And then if they have them in their backpacks every day, is there any way to think through how many 1.5-inch binders we ask them to have? Because that's a lot to carry.
Mm-hmm. So supplies that they'll share will most likely be more consumable. And so that's not really sharing, right? You're taking that consumable item. So a map printed on a piece of paper. I know that that's something our social studies teachers feel really strongly about. They want to make sure that those kids have the maps to work with, and having it on paper as opposed to on their screen. So that's one thing that will be that students will have. The textbooks, they're going to be something that we have to be really careful about. Part of our health and safety plan, there's some details in that about sharing items like textbooks, that they need to be cleaned and sanitized after use. So that's something we're aware of. Having the Chromebooks, I believe we're going to be using our textbooks a little less than we normally do. And the list of items that the school supplies, you mentioned the number of binders. The school supplies that we listed are to kind of get the kids up and running. Over the course of the first few weeks of school, we will figure out exactly what we need. We kind of do that every year. I always recommend, and I'll do this as we get closer to reopening school. You don't need to bring all of your supplies on the first day of school. Really, you need, a 3-ring binder, a 1-inch 3-ring binder with some loose leaf paper in it, a pen and a pencil, and you're going to be great for a period of time. And as things get added that are needed, you can add them to the book bag. The fact that kids are carrying their book bags, we will be communicating with kids, we'll be communicating with families about how that's going to work. And we're super flexible. We're going to do what's right for kids, and we're going to do what's right for families. And if we need to scale things back a little bit, we can totally accommodate that.
Great. We had a couple of questions about Haverford Online, and I just want to take this opportunity to remind folks that there is a lot of information about Haverford Online on our website, including we held a similar sort of Q&A session that you can view if you're interested. There's a list of frequently asked questions. And most importantly, we now have our course descriptions as well as our registration forms located on the website. So whether or not you indicated that you are interested in Haverford Online in the parent preference form, if you choose to enroll a child in Haverford Online, you need to go to that website and fill out those registration forms. So that's just the Haverford Online piece there. There's a question about present enrollment in Haverford Online, and they're coming in so quickly that I don't want to cite any numbers now, but I will find a way to share that information on the website. I'll look for, how can we post where our current numbers are with our date and time so you can get a sense of that. Yeah, no problem. And we had also a question I just wanted to hit. Oh, the days that students are at home, they will not be receiving any live instruction. Is this correct? So the Monday through Thursday days will be mainly asynchronous. If there is a way to find a way for kids to connect with other students, if there is some opportunity, a demonstration or something that's happening in class, and there is a way to broadcast that particular thing or do something there, we might be able to make some live connections. But generally speaking, in the Monday through Thursday time, that will be students engaging with the material, students engaging with each other, and not live instruction from a teacher speaking with them at that time. There will still be attendance taken, assignments assigned, feedback provided on those assignments, and so forth. And then the beginning of the next day's class will be, all right, let's take a look at how yesterday's learning went when you were home, and we can move from there. So just as a little information about that. Then the next questions are sort of all related to, so what happens if someone gets sick? If someone in the cohort tests positive for COVID, what's happening with that?
I'll take that question, Jen.
Okay. Yep.
There's no very specific if this, then that, because what we have learned from many interactions with the Chester County Health Department is that there are several different variables that they will look at. That is the health authority, the entity that will be providing guidance to us. So let's step through. If we receive a call, from a teacher that a teacher tests positive for COVID, our first call is to the Chester County Department of Health. They are establishing teams to support the schools. So there will be someone who meets with our building principals, gets to know the administrative staff, and someone who will be available to us. There are a series of questions that we will be asked, and that's what makes answering this question a little bit difficult. So we will be asked about the wearing of masks. We will be asked, how many students did that teacher come in contact with throughout the day? How long was the contact? So if it was, a passing in the hall, they're not going to do anything about that. But if it was contact with this group of students for more than 15 minutes, or contact with this group of adults for more than 15 minutes, then there are just some examples. There are a number of different questions that they're going to ask us, and they will say any number of things in response. They may tell us the classroom needs to be quarantined for 24 hours. That does not necessarily mean the students stay home for 24 hours. It will all depend on the answers to those questions that we were given. Or they may say the students in that class need to stay home for 10 days. A lot of the variables come into play there. And then we will act on the guidance that they give us, and do whatever informing that they will indicate that we should be doing.
Great. Questions about sixth grade orientation. What are we? I know we usually have a robust program for that. What could that look like this year?
So sixth grade orientation will take place when the kids are actually in school. Orientation the last few years, part of that orientation occurred at Unity Day. So Unity Day, the kids got to meet, had the opportunity to meet kids from other schools. There was a tour of the school and an introduction to the staff. We will do those things when the kids are in the building. So it'll be, delivered at a different time of the year. They're actually going to be in the building when they have their orientation, as opposed to having their orientation before they become a student at the middle school. I think they're going to, what we're going to do with our teaching staff and our school counselors and administrative team is develop a program to ensure that they feel comfortable, that they feel like they're included and welcomed. That's a huge piece of what we're going to have to plan for next year. So, and I've always said this, I've said this every year, and every year, we have a different group of kids. The year is slightly different every year. Like, our goal that first day of school is for every kid to go home and tell their family they had a great day. So that's the focus of the first day. And then we've always had at our school, a focus for the first week as well. Like, we're great at doing that. And our staff is phenomenal. Our staff is very dialed into our kids, our community, how to support students and make them feel good about the day and the week. And we know that if we can make that happen, then everything else kind of falls into line. So that's not something new for us. I mean, we just have to adjust the way we do things and when we do them. But that's going to be something we're pretty comfortable taking on.
Great. And I assume that the same would be true if we, for some reason, had to start with 100%, online model. Not that I'm saying we are, just the question is, if we did, there would still be some kind of sixth grade orientation?
Absolutely. We found we had a lot of discussion with our staff and our students about online at the end of the year this year. And we know that relationship is critical. The relationship between the teacher and the student, to get a high yield on the teaching and learning part. So we are absolutely going to make sure that online relationship, if we're 100% online, is in a really good place, because we know that it's going to be better for the student, and we know that it's going to be better for our staff to have that high yield on the teaching and learning part.
Great. We did have a few questions. What if my child has to stay home and, is quarantined or for whatever reason, but can still engage? Is there a way that they can still, complete the work through Canvas? How can they continue to get their education, even if they have to be home for that period of time?
And I think with the elementary, I think you might have answered that question for elementary.
I did.
If you want to answer that, so that it's like.
Yes, I did. I took that one.
Okay, I know either one of the two of you did, so I figured to keep it consistent.
You're seeing a number of administrators, the administrative team at the middle school here with us tonight, who've been doing an incredible amount of work figuring out the best way to open schools. Well, absent from the screen tonight, but just as heavily involved in looking at how to safely open schools are our teachers. And they've been engaged in a lot of discussions, even just within this last week, these last few days. And the two primary areas that they are focusing upon, with children being in-person learning for 2 days, how do they, as the professional educators, ensure that it's more than 50% of the curriculum that children are exposed to and have the opportunity to interact with? And we're relying on their expertise to identify, what can be done, what needs to be done to ensure that happens. The second thing that they are examining is when we look at students who, what was described there, quarantined, but certainly capable of doing work, not so ill that they're unable to, participate in school. How do we structure some learning opportunities so that when that child returns, they don't feel like an outsider? And not just in terms of the relationships with kids in the classroom, but in terms of the content and the learning experience that other students have had. So we're relying on the educational experts that we have in the district to continue to work through those, in addition to some other questions, but know that your children remain first and foremost in the minds of our teachers as well.
A question, are there still going to be teams, Arctic Fox, etc.?
Absolutely. So students will be assigned a team, and I spoke a little, I spoke earlier about Power School, and we've scheduled our school like we've always scheduled our school. And Power School is very important uh, because it helps us, create those schedules for each and every one of our students. And being on that team, being in that homeroom and a math class on that team places a student with a group of kids that they'll be together with, especially when we return, at some point fully to school. Uh, Keeping kids on schedule is very important. If we start to creatively try and change some things, when we do return to school, the things that we change, maybe an individual schedule, uh, will not be aligned with what's in Power School, and we're going to have class sizes that are off. We could have a student who has totally different teachers. So we're really mindful of staying connected to the schedules that we have in Power School.
Speaking of staying connected, there are a couple of questions about clubs. Will we still be able to offer them?
Absolutely. That's the most exciting part of the middle school. We have, if you've seen our website, there's activities and clubs and athletics that happen at the middle school. If you're familiar with a student who's in high school right now, you know that they're participating in interscholastic sports. So there's an organization called PIAA that dictates, how that program is going to operate day to day. If they're operating at the high school when we start, then our 7th and 8th graders, because those are the students that are approved to participate in interscholastic sports. I would assume that as long as there's no directive from PIAA, that we would be participating in sports as well. There's lots of after-school clubs and activities that we typically hold throughout the year. Some of those activities and clubs will be taking place in an online format. If we can manage to have those clubs and activities take place face-to-face, we'll certainly do that as well. Just have to wait and see what our school plan is, and wait and see where we are when we typically start clubs and activities. So they typically don't start up like the first few weeks of school. They typically start up after we've gotten into our groove. So the first few weeks of school, we kind of get into our groove at the middle school, and then we start, populating those clubs and activities. But our expectation is to make it happen and honor all of the guidelines that will be put in place in our health and safety plan.
Great. Going back to the cohorting, will siblings be staying together as part of a cohort?
Yes. The expectation is, I mentioned that we're going to be cohorting alphabetically by last name. So some siblings have the same last name. Some siblings do not. The siblings that have the same last name, that's pretty easy, because we're going to schedule the whole school that way. If there's a sibling that has a different last name, we'll pick up on a lot of those. But if we somehow miss one, we're parents and family members can contact us, and we'll make an adjustment.
Great. Just a note, there may have been some specific pupil services related questions. I just wanted to give a little shout out. Our pupil services team is also having a session, an information session tomorrow night. I believe it's at 7 o'clock. Is that right, Dr. Rishi? 7 o'clock. So there will be more information available there as well. And you might be able to get some questions answered that might be more specific than what's happening here at the middle school. We have a few teacher-related questions. Are teachers going to be maintaining 6 feet of distance? Will they be able to move around the room? What's any thought about, like, how do they eat their lunch? And I think Dr. Rushi just spoke about their participation in the planning, but how have they been able to be involved?
Sure. So the question about moving around the room and maintaining 6 feet of distance. the classrooms that we've done some modeling in our classrooms to see what, that would look like. And we're going to set our classrooms up so that there's 6 feet of distance between others. That's going to be one of our general protocols, that people stay 6 feet apart. They'll be able to move around the room and still be 6 feet away from others. So, that's going to be possible. It's going to change a little bit about how we typically do our teaching and learning. Our teachers are, and that's going to be hard for our teachers, because our teachers want to, get down next to the student and literally, like, shoulder to shoulder, work through things with kids. So that's going to be really hard for our teachers not to do that. And, it's just something that we're going to have to adapt to. And it's just the environment that we're in right now. But to answer the question, they'll have the ability to move around the classroom. Where are the teachers going to eat their lunch? We will have a space for our staff to eat lunch. Typically, they were sometimes eating lunch in an area where it's just not possible to be 6 feet apart, the spaces that they were using in the past. So we have a large group space in our building that we're going to set up, and they'll have the ability to be 6 feet apart, and they'll have to follow the same, if you're in our building, whether you're, 13 or 31, the expectations are going to be the same. Wearing a mask, 6 feet apart, one direction, facing the same direction, using, hand hygiene. Those expectations are going to be for everybody. So, it's just something that we're going to have to, as a community, we all are going to be in the same building working together, kids and adults. We're going to have to all follow very, very similar rules. And so their lunch experience is going to be different, just like the kids' lunch experience.
Okay, thank you. A couple of questions about if you are in the middle of the hybrid model, are interested in switching to Haverford Online, or likewise in the middle of Haverford Online are interested in switching to the hybrid model, how would something, and is something like that possible?
And I think
I'll take that first, Mr.
Sure.
Rand. It's actually going to be a little bit easier to switch from the hybrid model into Haverford Online. However, with that being said, some of it will be staffing dependent. Moving from Haverford Online into the hybrid model, we are going to have some restrictions. It will no longer be Mr. Haran saying, well, if you can get me another desk, I can put another kid in that room. He will not be able to do that. So there will be a maximum capacity in the classroom that will be based on how those desks are arranged, 6 feet, with 6 feet of social distancing. So we always want to accommodate, particularly in this situation. We certainly understand that, the circumstances in someone's home may change over time, and it may be important that now I don't want my child entering the school and coming back to home, so I need to have Haverford Online as an option. And the reverse could be true. When the school year started, I could not have my child going into schools. Things have changed for us, and now my child can. If we can accommodate that, we will, but we do know that there are times where we may say to someone, there isn't any space in that particular room because we have to socially distance at 6 feet.
I muted because my children were making noise, so I apologize for that. We did have a question about how flexible can the schedule be during those at-home days? Because for some families, well, it's nice to have a schedule, they need it to be their own schedule. And is there flexibility for that in the at-home days?
So I think I'll start answering this question, but Dr. Rushi or Jen, if you might want to jump in as well. We're obligated to provide a certain amount of instruction to students, and for us to do that, it's it's a full day of school. If we were going to be flexible, there would still need to be a full day of school, like what a typical school day would be. And we'd have to ensure that that's happening. So, I'm not saying that's something that we can't explore, but people need to be mindful that it would be a full day of school. I mean, I don't know if anybody has anything to add to that.
No, I think you described it well.
There was a question back when we were talking about the at-home and the in-school learning. Fridays, I didn't talk about Fridays when I described it. I think you may have, but that is an opportunity where teachers will be able to meet with small groups, where there might be opportunities to bring both cohorts together, where there are really great opportunities to reach out and make contact with families. It's a full day of learning for students, but the teachers don't have another set of students in front of them live at that moment. At that point, they're available to instruct students and work with students virtually that day live. So I just wanted to clarify that Friday, it will include live interaction with teachers on that day. Okay, what about gym? How will gym work, and how far apart will the students be in chorus, and will they be wearing masks in chorus?
All right, so gym and chorus. I'll do chorus first. So we spoke a little earlier about what space they would be using, and the chorus will take place in the auditorium. Right now, our auditorium seats a little over 500 people. I'm kind of guesstimating that our chorus classes are going to have about 45 students. So they'll be spaced at, depending on what the lesson is, they're going to be spaced more than 6 feet apart. But I can imagine that there's times where, whether it's 10 or 15, and there's a little bit of more investigating that we need to do. There's a little communication that we need to have with our unified arts teachers in that area. Because our teachers are very well informed, and they've been emailing and we've been communicating about what that might look like, that distance. Until our model is approved by the school board, we've been holding off on some of those last minute details because there's just so many what ifs and plans that have been discussed. We were trying to focus our efforts on, getting all the material ready for central administration to review, as well as our school board about the models. I believe after this Thursday, we'll be able to focus a little bit more and give people more specifics about the distance. The other part of that course question was, having masks. There's so many different kinds of masks that are out there at this point. I know that I've had some very minor communication with our choral teacher about that. And I would expect that we will have more communication once a plan is approved, but we will have to share that, what that's going to look like with families. I just don't have a definitive answer right now because we don't know what our model is going to be. So that was one part. The question about phys ed, what will that look like? We're really fortunate that our phys ed staff, and I love the fact that this is what happens in our building. Our phys ed staff is out of the building in any opportunity that they can take. So, if the weather is not, brutal or uncomfortable, our kids are out of the building. And we have an incredible space outside of our school. We have a beautiful turf field. We have a brand new track that was, it's in the process of getting laid down right now. We have a huge grass field alongside our building as well. So plenty of space for kids to space out way more than 6 feet apart. We've had some minor communication with our phys ed staff about what they're well aware that we're going to be, engaged in activities where there's a lot of social distancing and not a lot of sharing of materials. So they're already planning for that. So weather-wise, if it's comfortable, we're outside. when the weather's not comfortable, we have our large gym AB, that is available for use. Some of our instruction will have to take place in the classroom. There might be part of our schedule where, there's a couple rooms that would like to use the gym, but we can only fit 1 or 2 classrooms in there if we're really social distancing appropriately. And some of the instruction is going to be on the, not using equipment, but it's going to be like more of a traditional lesson, which we do already in health and phys ed classes already. It's not just, playing a sport with a ball or some other item. They do a lot of like what you might consider traditional teaching and learning. So we're going to have to be mindful of our environment. We're really fortunate that we have great outdoor space. We have pretty good indoor space when we're considering social distancing. So we just have to be really, really careful of how we use our space and that we follow our health and safety plan. So things will look a little different, but we're super fortunate that we have the facilities that we have.
Speaking of facilities, we've had a couple of questions about ventilation, air conditioning. Can you just speak to, do we have systems in place that ensure ventilation?
Sure, I'll start and Dr. Rushi may jump in. Our maintenance director met with administrative staff a week or 2 ago and explained that our building, we're one of the newer buildings because our building was renovated a short time ago. There was this $65 million renovation to our building that was completed a few years ago. Our HVAC system circulates outside air frequently throughout the day and filters it. And because the discussion has come up about like some of what you're seeing is that keeping windows open, keeping doors open for ventilation, that's not necessarily applicable to our building because of the new HVAC system. His recommendation, and he could probably give, and I'm sure people are going to want more technical information than what I'm providing at some point, but it was his recommendation that a building like ours with a newer HVAC system, it's actually better to have the windows closed and let the system operate the way it's supposed to operate, which is, bringing that outside air and transitioning it throughout the day and filtering it. So that was what he shared with us. I don't know if I explained that clearly enough, Dr. Rushi, or if you have something to add.
No, I think you did a good job explaining that. And I did ask Environmental Control Solutions, with whom we work. We've had a long-standing contract with them, helping us with HVAC or any kind of, ventilation assessments that need to be made over time. I have asked them, for the information that they contributed to our health and safety plan, to put some of that into, plain speak that will help me to communicate that even better.
Dan, if a teacher gets sick in the middle of the school day or has to go home, what's the plan for that?
I don't know who answered that question for elementary. It was either Dr. Rushi or Jen. Was it either one of you?
Has to go home. Well, I answered the substitute ones. I mean, we do have a number of what are referred to as guaranteed building subs at each one of the buildings. We still have those positions in place. That we will, be looking to see creative ways that we can find additional substitutes. It's a real concern. Will substitutes be available? And keeping our staff healthy for a number of reasons. First and foremost, their own health and personal well-being. But keeping them healthy. If we don't have staff, we can't open, regardless of who closes us or who says we need to be open. So that is a concern in looking at the substitutes. So I don't know if there's more to that, but we are not limiting our substitutes. We are still going that way.
And I think some of the details around that question will be shared in the health and safety plan as well. And I think once that health and safety plan comes out and people can read it, they get a better feel of the details of.
There's actually not a lot though about substitutes in there. I mean, you're right. There's not a lot of detail beyond what we just said here.
Okay.
I am just aware of the time. It's 8:26, and we want to be respectful of everybody's commitment to this process. So I'll just do a couple of last questions here, and then we'll ask Dr. Rushi and Dan if they have any closing remarks. There was a question about how do we report absences, still school messenger. We will make that clear. If anything changes in that process, we'll ensure that everybody is aware of that. I'm not yet sure how Canvas might make some reporting of attendance more streamlined, or we may still use that system. Are half days or holidays going to be canceled, or will the school calendar be changed in any way? Just so you know, we did go through to see how would an A cohort be impacted by holidays, and then how would the B cohort be impacted by holidays, and the number is almost even, which is unbelievable. So that's very nice, so that we should be able to maintain our pace with those cohorts without making those adjustments. I have not heard of any potential adjustments to the half days on the calendar, but that's something that would have to be board approved. So you'll learn about that through that process. And then we did have just families talk about, is there anything they can be doing to help their kids prepare for what is going to look and feel like a very different learning experience and school experience in the fall. And I'm sure that, you know, the middle school principals and the teachers have been talking about ensuring that the students are aware of what to expect, having pictures of themselves without the masks around, orienting them to the room, using video ahead of time. And, you know, if families can do what they can to help support their kids and understanding that it will be different and getting them acclimated to the routines like mask wearing and distancing that will be required at school, that of course will be helpful. And we will continue to post resources on our website as well that parents might want to use in talking to kids about COVID and about working into their schooling and reopening and coming back to in-person school. So with that, I'll ask, I know that Dr. Rushi has closing remarks. Dan, do you have anything you'd like to say in closing before Dr. Rushi shares what he has?
Sure, just a few quick things. I mean, and I mentioned this, not in this environment, but at another meeting. I feel really fortunate to be working in a district where there is the opportunity for so much communication. We're getting a lot of great communication and being kept up to date through Dr. Rushi's updates. Our school board meetings have been well attended, and there's been some great sharing. Having the opportunity, and this is all guided by Dr. Rushi, to create these forums where people can participate. I've had communication with friends in other districts and family members whose kids are in different districts, and there's nowhere near the level of communication going on in those districts compared to what's happening in this district. And that communication is good. It creates, you know, an environment where people feel heard, and, you know, it helps us make the decisions that we're going to make, because we truly do listen to what people are saying. And it's helping shape the direction we're going in. So I feel fortunate to have to have that kind of work environment. I'm also very thankful for the administrative team and our staff. People have been working, like I said earlier, more than they've ever worked in the summer. I mean, typically in the summers we're working and it's just a different mode. We are like on hyper mode every day. I mean, the people that I work with, and I'm not just talking about the administrative team, our secretaries, our teachers, our maintenance staff, everybody is doing above and beyond. So although it's challenging and honestly, it's frustrating at times, we have a super committed team. So I know that that's going to result in like the best opportunity for our kids and our families. So I'm super thankful for a lot of what's happening, even though it's a incredibly challenging and daunting task.
Thanks, Ms. Saxa. As was mentioned a few times, on Thursday evening, the board will be approving the health and safety plan. And although a lot of the discussion has been how we will start the school year, there are many other components to that health and safety plan. You know, going into the cleaning products that will be used, how often, you know, spaces will be used. We know the focus of everyone's attention is how schools will open in September. But I just want you to know there's more to that than just the way in which schools are going to open. Once that occurs, then a lot of your communication, I mean, I will still continue to communicate with parents, but a lot of your communication is going to be coming from the team at the middle school. You know, we start the month of August later this week, and it's around that time that they would start communicating with you about a return to school. So their communication will be dealing with many more of these logistics that are worked out here. I will also say to you, it's 5 weeks before our school year begins. And to those of us, and I imagine many of you, it's, oh, there are only 5 weeks. In terms of this virus, that's an incredibly long period of time. So I know there were a few questions that came up. I saw a couple of things up about, you know, has the decision in Downingtown or other districts to go 100% virtual, you know, influenced any of your decision, or have you even, you know, even thought about it? If you look at that, a lot of the districts that are they're starting to make those decisions now. I don't know. We will, you know, take a look at, you know, some of those metrics. I do know that some of the concerns are around the availability of testing and the return rate at which you get the results back from, you know, from the test. The availability of substitutes that, you know, that we just talked about. Looking at the metrics, we being the superintendents in Delaware County have 2 meetings a week. One of them is with the director of the health authority in Chester County. And we get information from her about, you know, our counts, our cases on the rise in our areas, in our specific townships, within what, you know, age range, and when it might be a concern to us. So with everything that we've presented for you tonight, I know that it is incredibly stressful for you, because the plan is only as good as, you know, 8:30 on July 28th. And when we'll hold on to this plan as, you know, as long as we can. But if things change tremendously, then our plan may have to shift, you know, as well. And please just know that if it does, we will communicate to you as soon as humanly possible to know what that will be. But in the end, as we started out, the teachers, the administrators, you, the parents, guardians, you know, the children, have made the school district of Haverford Township a very loving and caring and nurturing, you know, community. And it will continue to be so, whatever way we start the school year. So thank you for spending this time with us this evening. And I'm sure we will continue to communicate.